Call to order. It is September 17th, 2025, and the time is 6:32 p.m. Our mission is to provide a safe and caring climate and culture in which we engage, inspire, educate, prepare, and empower all learners in partnership with their surrounding community to be successful in today's and tomorrow's society. Heather, can you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And then when you're ready, can you please call roll?
The following board members are present at the District Administration Office. Scott Andresen.
Here.
Natalie Copeland.
Here.
Al Dahlgren.
Here.
Zach Dorholt.
Here.
Diana Fenton.
Here.
Shannon Haas.
Here.
Heather Weems. Here. The following cabinet members and staff are present at the District Administration Office. Superintendent Dr. Lori Putnam, Assistant Superintendent of Secondary Education Dr. Jason Harris, Assistant Superintendent of E5 Learning Nikki Hansen, Executive Director of Community Education and Community Partnerships Shannon Avenson, Executive Director of Finance and Business Services Amy Scalarud, Executive Director of Human Resources and General Counsel Tracy Flynn-Bowe, Executive Director of Innovation and Technology Services Katie Herbold, Executive Director of Operations Matthew Boucher, Executive Director of Special Education Danny Mayer, Media Technicians Paul Novak and Gordy Scott.
Thank you. Then I'm looking for a motion to approve tonight's Board of Education meeting agenda.
So move.
I have a motion by Scott, a second by Natalie. Heather, can you call vote?
Zach Dorholt.
Yes.
Al Dahlgren.
Yes.
Natalie Copeland.
Yes.
Scott Andresen.
Yes.
Heather Weems, yes. Shannon Haas.
Yes.
Diana Fenton.
Yes.
Thank you. Then we have the consent agenda. The consent agenda consists of non-controversial items that the board adopts routinely without debate. Any single member may remove an item from the consent agenda by requesting removal at the time the consent agenda is moved for adoption. On tonight's consent agenda, item A, approval of minutes from August 6, 2025 and August 20th, 2025 board meetings. Item B, approval of bills and other financial transactions in the grand total amount of $4,237,530.53. Item C, approval of personnel staff changes, and item D, acceptance of grant awards and donations. At this time, does any board member wish to remove an item from the consent agenda? Okay, looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda as read.
So move.
I have a motion by Scott, a second by Natalie. Heather, can you call vote again?
Shannon Haas.
Yes.
Scott Andresen.
Yes.
Al Dahlgren.
Yes.
Diana Fenton.
Yes.
Heather Weems, yes. Natalie Copeland.
Yes.
Zach Dorholt.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to discussion and action items. First was a placeholder action items for approval of tentative agreements. We do not have any yet. Hopefully next time we meet. Then item B is an action item. We have the approval of the preliminary levy certification, and that is being presented tonight by Amy Scalarud, Executive Director of Finance and Business Services.
Okay. Good evening, Chair Haas, Superintendent Putnam, members of the school board. Okay, we are looking at the 2025 Pay 2026 preliminary levy this evening. Just a little bit about levy and timing. There's always a disconnect between when we levy, when we get funds, and when we actually recognize that revenue into a fiscal year. So the levy that we're looking at right now, we will certify, have the board approve preliminary levy tonight. final levy comes back in December, and then those funds actually get collected from taxpayers during calendar year 2026, and they get recognized by the district as revenue in fiscal year 2027. So we're about a year out in terms of when this will actually hit the revenue for the district. There are 4 components of the levy. We'll start with the general fund. The general fund is really a subset of a number of different levy components, which you see on the screen. The one thing I do want to point out, you'll see the top 2 lines there are 0. Those are either current voter-approved referendum levies or previous voter-approved referendums that the board has converted to a renewal sort of authority. We have none of those, so we have zeros on both of those lines because we do not currently have any sort of voter-approved referendum. So I do always like to point that out. You'll see we're not going to go through every line. The majority of kind of lines 3 through 8 are primarily driven by enrollment, which is why you see some increases there, particularly on line 3. That's the local optional levy that is directly tied to enrollment, as are a number of those other subcomponents of the levy. You'll see we're a little bit in advance of the enrollment report, but when we get to the enrollment report, you'll see that we do have increased enrollment, and so that is what is driving some of those levy increases. The a couple other things on here that are large changes from last year that I do want to point out. Line 6 is the reemployment levy, which is unemployment. This is not the summer unemployment. The summer unemployment currently is still funded through the state, but this is our regular unemployment. You'll see that amount on last year's levy was quite small. That was because there were some reimbursements from the state through the COVID years and throughout the pandemic, where the state actually came back and refunded some of the district's unemployment costs that had already previously been levied. So there were some negative adjustments there. So that's the reason for the large increase in that line. It's not that we haven't had unemployment. There was just some adjustments that were offsetting that levy. The other one that I will point out is lines 10 and 11. The long-term facilities maintenance program is considered part of the general fund levy. It's a large portion, as you can see, of the district's overall general fund levy. We do have a decrease in that this year. That was intentional because we knew that we had on the next line down on the building lease levy, some large adjustments from previous years that had lowered last year's levy that were going away. And so to make that tax neutral for taxpayers, we had lowered that LTFM levy for this levy cycle so that we could offset that and keep that balanced. The second component of the levy is the community education levy. This is a little bit different than the general fund levy, whereas the majority of that is driven by enrollment. Community education, the vast majority of these levy line items are based on community population. So we levy the same amount regardless of whether our enrollment increases or decreases. It's driven by population. You'll see that there's some decreases here. Overall, that is not because our population base has increased, but the way the community education funding works is there's a levy component and there's an aid component. And so there's a shift between how much is being calculated for our district for next year coming from the state in the form of state aid compared to the levy. So we're not really decreasing the revenue we're bringing in total for community education. It's just a change in how that's allocated between the two sources. And then the third component of the levy is debt service. And so this is where the majority of the change in our levy for this year is really coming from, and that is because of the referendum. So you see on line 1, the required debt service, an increase of about $1.7 million. That is from last spring's referendum that was approved. The good news that I'm sure no one will be sad about is that there were offsetting that increase, some excess debt service adjustments, and so we're actually finding that the levy increase is less than what we had projected and communicated leading up to the referendum. So always good to have some of those adjustments and be able to provide that relief to our taxpayers. And so then this just summarizes all three of those levy components. Again, the largest increase being coming from the debt service side, and then the general fund increase is driven by primarily enrollment. So in total, the dollar amount increase is $1,658,000. That converts to 4.7% on the dollar amount of the increase. I want to be clear that we don't set a tax rate. We tax differently than cities and counties. And so 4.7% doesn't convert to a 4.7% increase in our tax rate. We don't exactly know what our tax rate is because we don't have final numbers on what our tax capacity is, but if we assume some sort of similar increase to last year, on a tax rate basis, that's less than a 1% increase, which again is less than what we had planned based on what was communicated out in advance of the referendum. So that is the preliminary levy. Are there questions? Yes, this is an action item. And the action item, just for clarification, is to certify the maximum levy. Based on MDE's calculations right now, the maximum levy converts to the dollar amounts we just looked at, but sometimes there are corrections and adjustments. And so the dollar amount can change, slightly from now to the final. But the way that's handled is to certify the maximum based on what's calculated and allowable in state law.
Al?
Amy, can you put it into dollar terms? Before the referendum, we told people that if they approved the referendum, there would be a X dollar per household, or an average on $180,000. It wasn't a 180 or somewhere in there. Or 250, I think we used, $250,000 household. And what this represents versus what we had promised.
So I don't have it on a tax impact basis. However, on a dollar amount basis, if we didn't have some of those offsetting debt service adjustments and other things, we would have expected the dollar amount to go up by about 2.2 million. So we're about $500,000, less than we had projected, which is about 20% or so. So we would expect that, we're looking at roughly a 20% lower tax impact than what was communicated. I don't have the actual numbers in terms of what that equates to, on a average household, but just using rough math, that's about where we would be.
Okay. And then on enrollment increases to these funds, is that controllable or is that not controllable? Is there any way on our side that we can control the cost of the increase? Or is it just,
So
that's what it is?
generally speaking, I'll say yes and no. So those increases are going to come through automatically. You can control to some extent the timing, right? We could have chosen to not put in our enrollment increase now, and then 3 years from now, when they true up the fiscal 26 and 27 actual, those increases would come then. There are portions of the levy that you can do what you call under levying. The challenge with that is in almost every area where you can under levy, there's almost, I would say, a penalty because it results in decreases in corresponding aid in all of those categories. And so generally speaking, you don't see districts under levy for that reason, because you're kind of, double hitting in terms of the revenue loss then.
So the bottom line in this one is that when we did the referendum, we told people it was going to cost them, what was the number there? It was
This is a long time.
it was like $25 a year, wasn't it? Or-
Yeah. Lori, do you remember? My brain is really tired today.
The
What
dollar
was the
amount
dollar?
we told people the levy was, that if they approved the referendum, we said their taxes were going to increase by what?
$7 on a $300,000 house? No, $200,000. 250.
So around $37 a year.
Yeah.
And we're coming in, this levy is lower than that.
Yes.
So,
Yep.
okay, thank you.
Here if we want to know. let's go to our website. For a $250,000 house, on the 65 million borrowing, it was 39.96.
Yeah, so it will be less than that. And, like I said, our dollar amount ended up being about, 20% less. And that could even be lowered further depending on what happens with the tax capacity and the tax base. But yes, it will be less than what people, if they had gone through that tax calculator on their own home, they should expect to see a number, valuations holding constant, right? We don't control if somebody's valuation changed and it's different now than what it was then. But if your valuation on your home is similar, then we would be expecting people to see a lower impact than what they were expecting.
Okay, so administration recommends approval of the maximum levy limitation certified by the Minnesota Department of Education. Looking for a motion? Al?
I would motion that we approve certifying the preliminary levy at the maximum amount.
Second.
I have a motion by Al, a second by Scott. Any further discussion at all? Heather, can you call vote?
Al Dahlgren. Yes. Shannon Hawes.
Yes.
Natalie Copeland.
Yes.
Zach Dorholt. Yes. Heather Weems. Yes. Diana Fenton.
Yes.
Scott Andreessen.
Yes.
Thank you. And then Amy is rolling right into the final levy certification announcement.
Yes, and this is a very brief item. We just by statute have to announce when the final levy certification will be. We always do that at our regularly scheduled board meeting, the second meeting in December. So for this year, that is December 17th, 2025 at 6:30 p.m. And we do provide a time for public comment at that meeting after the levy presentation in accordance with the truth and taxation requirements.
Any discussion on that at all? Okay, thank you. And then again, not going anywhere. Next up, we have the enrollment report, again presented by Amy Scalard, Executive Director of Finance and Business Services. And also joining us is Shannon Avison, Executive Director of Community Education and Community Partnerships.
Or we can share because we're not going at the same time. As long as you're not sick. I am not sick. Okay, we will move right along. I am going to start. I have some summary numbers on here that I'll go over, but I did pass out to board members the detailed list that shows a multi-year comparison of enrollment. And so you may want to have that up in front of you as a reference. And again, we're not going to go over every change for every building. That would take forever. But we're going to hit the highlights, the summary. But if there are specific questions, certainly we will be able to answer those. So in summary, for K-12 enrollment, and so we're pulling pre-K out of this for our base numbers, we have, based on our second Friday counts, and so that would have been last Friday after the first 2 weeks of school, we always go in and anybody who hasn't come, we remove them from the system if we haven't had a communication from a parent as to why they're not attending. So after running all of those numbers, we are looking at an increase from last year of 266 students. That's about 2.9%. Now, some of that was projected based on kind of class size out, where we were last spring. We had been up a little bit in the spring compared to where we were last fall. And so it's about 193 students higher than what we projected. As far as how that breaks down, elementary is really driving almost all of that increase. We are 223 higher than elementary compared to last fall, with that being 134 higher than projected, and that equates to about 5.4%. When we look at that by building, every elementary actually had an increase from last fall, some larger than others. The biggest increases were at Westwood, Talahi, and Madison. And Westwood, that was a projected increase because we knew that as we add that immersion programming up a grade each year, we expect to see their enrollment go up. Also to highlight kindergarten enrollment, we have a significant increase in kindergarten enrollment compared to last year. Last fall, we had 690 kindergarten students. We projected right around that. We were projected 680. And as of Friday, we had 761. So we have a lot of kindergartners out there this year, which is great. And so that is driving a lot of that increase in that overage from where we projected. Then going to secondary enrollment is a little bit more stable, but we do have an increase. Overall, it's an increase of 26, but really that's a larger increase in middle level. Middle level is up 47, mostly at South on that increase, and then the high school is actually down by 21. When we look at those secondary numbers, we exclude McKinley from the fall counts because McKinley's numbers vary from day to day, and you'll see that if you look at the multi-years on the detail spreadsheet, just because of the nature of the programming, that can really skew numbers when we compare from year to year. And so you'll see McKinley is included down below in the alternative sites versus being included when we talk about our traditional secondary enrollment. And then there is an increase in the alternative sites, and that is primarily, there's some increases in some sites, decreases in others, but ultimately, kind of when you look at it all together, the majority of why we're up is because of an increase in students at care and treatment program sites.
All right, and I am here to share with you where some of our new to district trends, what we're seeing in those new to district students. The Welcome Center enrolled over 1,000 new to district students this summer. And as you know, this was my first summer working with that team, and I just have to say that I'm incredibly proud of the work that they do. They really strive to give an exceptional customer service, and there were days in July, August, and even through last week that we had families in there from start to finish, and they work incredibly hard. So I just wanted to put that in the room that they did just an amazing job this summer. I want to talk a little bit about enrollment trends for those groups. Again, this is just the new to district students, so not to confuse with Amy's report there. 817 of those new to district students were in the 1st through 12th grade. And even when I started to look at this data, I had to kind of clean that up and look at 235 of those were kindergartners. And what that means is, obviously, as Amy said, we had 761 kindergartners overall. The rest of those kindergartners were with us previously. So just some interesting data to note. They were with us in preschool and previously enrolled with us. Yep.
Can I ask a question? I'm confused. You said the Welcome Center enrolled over 8,000?
1,000.
Okay, I
Yes.
heard 8.
Sorry.
They had 1,000 new to districts, so.
Yes, correct.
With attrition, okay.
Yep. And so, like I said, 817, so that's where maybe my 8 came in. Apologize for that. We're in the 1st through 12th grade. Go ahead, thank you. And so just in looking, when we enroll into the Welcome Center, there are 5 different codes, and those codes tell us where the students come from. And so just in looking at this, you can see that 04 code means that they came from another district or charter school in Minnesota. So the bulk of our students, you can see there, came from another school or charter school or district in Minnesota. And then not enrolled before, those would be those kinders. So you see the number there matches up with those kinders that around that 230. And then next on that list, about over 100, 150 of those came from Minnesota non-publics enrolling in our system. And then you can see, interestingly, out of country and then out of state enrollments. And then what we have is impacted schools. So again, it is different from Amy's reporting. If you look at, Tech was the highest impacted school with 9th grade. I'm going to show you the numbers where those students, what grade levels they were in on the next slide. But Tech saw the highest number, and then Talahi, which also makes sense because Talahi has our most kindergarten classes. So new enrollment, Talahi would make sense for that to be one of the larger ones. And then South, as we mentioned, our South Side schools saw a lot of those new enrollments this year, Oak Hill and Apollo. And then new to district students by grade level, again, as you would expect, kindergarten being the highest. But then you'll look over ninth grade, those entry point years, and I guess that is a trend, is that in ninth and sixth grade is when we start to see some of those students moving over here from, like I said before, some of the non-publics or from different charter schools or moving into the district maybe from homeschool. And so that is what we typically would expect, but our numbers are verifying that we see those trends happening in ninth and then sixth grade. But other than that, we do see that spread throughout our grade levels in all of our numbers there. All right, so what does this mean? Obviously, as Amy mentioned, we have some next steps, means we have to continue to monitor and look at our enrollment, look at adds and drops over the next couple of weeks. We also need to review our class sizes and schedules. So it's been a while since I've been in a school system, but as you know, what we're doing and what Nikki and Jason do with our teams is we're really looking at making sure that our class sizes have a good average in them. Do we have some class sizes? Do we need to adjust and shift any of our schedules with these numbers? And then we look at if there are any potential staffing needs that we need to look at. Also, we did have 2 kindergarten teachers that were hired in August, so then have to look and see if there are any additional hires that need to happen. And then the other piece is obviously when we have an increase in enrollment, we need to look at our space needs, as you are aware, and look at resource allocation across the district. And that includes not only our general education classrooms, but it also includes resources for our EL learners, our special education learners as well. So looking at all of those pieces in the next couple of weeks. And then, of course, the biggest piece is that we celebrate. We're really excited to welcome all these new families and all of our students and families into our schools. So, yeah, any questions?
We got a lot more kids. Does that impact our boundaries? And if so, how's that working?
Well, I can speak to it a little bit as I'm on one of the boundary redesign teams. And it certainly is something that we're having a conversation about right now. And it's part of the reason I think that I was asked to bring this information to you here tonight, is that these enrollment trends and where we see students going in our district does impact where we need to shift. I think the last time we had a boundary update was in the 90s. And so certainly need to take a look at those space needs at some of our schools. As I mentioned before, Oak Hill is on there. South, we saw had some definite extra students in the sixth grade as well. So that's all part of that process, and looking at it is looking at these enrollment trends and obviously bringing that forward.
This is a really big increase in the number of students. I've been on the board 12 years, 13 years. I haven't ever seen anything approaching anywhere near these numbers. 200-300 students, that's a lot of students. That's 10, 12 classrooms if you put them in just their own classrooms. What are the trends in the state? Are we seeing a trend upward in the state, or are we seeing a trend downward? What are we bucking the system? Is this a baby boom from COVID?
I might defer this question to somebody else who has more than 8 weeks of experience in this role. But what I can tell you is, in the brief research and conversations that I've had, that this is not a trend in the state, that most school districts are not seeing an increase in enrollment. I would allow anybody else to share any additional information, but that is my understanding, that this is not typical at this time. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to our next discussion item. We have review of the 2023 through 2025 strategic plan outcomes, and welcoming Donna Roper, Executive Director of Research, Assessment, and AI Integration.
Good evening, Chair Haas, Superintendent Dr. Putnam, board members, and colleagues and the listening community. I'm going to wait 1 second here for my colleague to get this up for me. Thank you so much, Director Boucher, for her Executive Director, for running the show up here. Thank you, Operations. I'm reading my notes here to make sure that I don't go blank, because this is all in a URL, so he's going to run the show. So good evening. First of all, it's my pleasure to be here on behalf of many of the people in this room and so many people who are not in the room tonight to present you a review of our 23-25 strategic plan outcomes, and to just share how we're turning data into action to support meaningful growth for every learner in our system. And you each have a paper copy, and so I just want to say a quick thanks to Director Andreessen and Copeland and Fenton for some guidance this morning on how we can make the best use of our time this evening in presenting this report. I'm going to ask that if you could, on your paper copy, follow along for this first part of the presentation, and then if you have questions in the focus areas, if you don't mind just jotting those down and holding them so that I can get through the full presentation, and we'll circle back to hear what the questions are. And again, I am surrounded with lots of talent in the room. I'm sure one of us will be able to answer the questions that you may have. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. And our mission is read at the start of every board meeting, so I won't repeat it. The core values that we have guide every decision that we make and frame the work that you'll see in tonight's plan. Equity and access to high-quality learning for all, communities working together toward shared goals, lifelong learning as the key to thriving in a global world, shared responsibility among students, families, schools, and the community. These values are the lens through which we shape our progress and shape our next steps. Again, the 4 pillars as our priorities. Last year, we identified these 4 key pillars, and they have really struck chord with many of our leaders and our staff. It is guiding our strategic work. They remain at the heart of everything that we are doing right now, whether at the district level, in a school or a program. We're focused and centered on tying so much of our work back to safety, belonging, collaboration, and excellence, academic excellence as well. And so tonight we're going to focus on 3 questions, or I want you to keep these in the back of your mind, if you will, which is what we did when we looked at reviewing our outcomes, which is where are our strategies working, what data trends are kind of shaping our decisions, and then how are we accelerating progress in the year ahead. We've seen measurable gains this year. You're going to hear a little bit about that in literacy, in math performance, and progress for our English language learners. I am using the SOAR framework, which you may remember from last year. This is that framework that we do an analysis around the strengths, the opportunities, the aspirations that we hold, and then we take a look at the results. So as I go through the presentation tonight using this framework, I'm going to try and lift up at least one item from each of these. I know there's a lot in there, so I'm not going to take the time to read all of them, but I'm going to try and just point out a few, and I'm going to try to focus on the results. And so if you do have questions at the end, feel free to make sure you're noting those, and I'm happy to go back to things. Again, the aim of the SOAR analysis that we do on our strategic outcomes is really just because our aim is to keep building capacity through strong systemic improvement practices. All right, So focus area 1, and I'm really just very excited to share positive climate and culture. This is where we are creating those conditions for learning success. And this is the area that we had an intense amount of work done in the past year, really the past 2 years. And so if you think about our strengths in this focus area, safety, belonging, behavior responses, or responses to behaviors within our system, all strengths that we've now, I think, crystallized around. Opportunities, areas where we can grow and improve. For example, we want to continue to leverage our restorative practices to strengthen relationships and reduce conflict. And then as far as like our aspirations go, we want every student feeling a deep sense of belonging and being highly motivated to learn within our system. And so the results that we are highlighting, and there's so much data, but we can't share all of it. It's just too much. So we do pick and choose a few things that we can talk about. And tonight we're going to spend time on our suspension trends and also on understanding some of the perceptions around safety, belonging, collaboration, and excellence. And again, a strong school climate is really the foundation for our academic success. So it would make sense that we would be prioritizing that work and trying to get that right. And I'm really happy to say that we have, through a very proactive and tiered support system and restorative practices, along with cohesive system-wide responses happening in our system, been able to realize some really amazing results. And I don't know if we can blow up the chart in the lower left-hand corner of this slide. I just want to speak a little bit to the drops. So you're seeing with our in-school suspensions, we've literally dropped from 11% in 2022 to down to 5.6%. And this is the suspensions per population, per student population. And it's the population that can be suspended, which is our 1st through 12th graders, because we don't suspend kindergartners that I'm aware of anymore. So these are really solid outcome data. You've heard a lot from Director Bukowski about our incident data, and those are our outputs. Those are the process pieces and the output pieces. And then we get to these high-level outcomes, and this is where we want to see the impact. And this year and last year, we're realizing this really significant decrease. And I think in talking to staff in the buildings and going around and asking folks what's going on, because the decreases they're observable at nearly every school, almost 100% of our schools. In every student group, we are seeing a decrease in the numbers. And this is attributable to multifactorial pieces. It's process, it's systems, but more importantly, it is our people. It is our people responding in ways that there's enough people responding in a consistent manner to see these significant drops. So very exciting news on this front. If you must.
I must. I'm sorry. I must, because what I want to say here is that we have not relaxed our standards. So I don't want anybody to get confused when they see, a drop in suspensions, for anybody to say, well, then they're just not suspending students. We suspend students for safety-related behaviors, and that is all we suspend students for. So if you are seeing this, that means that there was a behavior that impacted safety, right? And that is all defined in the Code of Conduct. So it's very clear. So I just want to make that point strongly and clearly.
And also, we're not done. You can see we still have work to do, right? All right, moving on. The other data set that I just want to share with you speaks to some of the perception data. So in our system last year, we moved our surveys to not just once a year, but 3 times a year as a way to get more actionable data to act on and do things a little bit differently to improve the perceptions that folks are having around safety, belonging, and collaboration. And what we are seeing is our ongoing efforts to foster an inclusive culture are kind of reflected in these. And safety remains a very clear strength. We have over 90% of staff and 83% of families feeling schools are safe of the folks who responded. And so I will just couch that with that one caveat because we know we are continuing to work on the response rate from our families. And most students are reporting the same, that they feel safe at school. Under belonging in that category, we are showing strong progress as well, with more than 75% of our students saying they feel connected to their school, supported by even higher ratings from staff and families. When it comes to collaboration this year, the metrics that we chose to pull out from the survey data was tied to a couple of factors that you need in order to have effective collaboration. So we looked at the mutual respect piece, like if I feel like I'm in a respectful setting. We looked at, how do kids feel about that? How do teachers feel with their colleagues? Do they feel they're in a respectful work environment? We know that the modeling we do as adults in the systems filters down. And then we asked parents if they thought that their students felt respected at school. So we see a very different number in perceptions of how people perceive respect, which is just really interesting. And with, a lot of the culture work that we're doing, it's really important for us to recognize that there are differences in the ways in which we understand that. So we do have continued work to do kind of in those areas. The pattern tells us a couple of things, that the need for empathy and respect begins early, because we do see in our elementary data higher levels, middle goes down, high school goes down, right? And then it also tells us that we just need a continued focus on these skills because they kind of fade over time, and impacting peer relationships, behavior, and it all affects the overall climate. So it's going to be important for us to not loosen up on our desire to have those be working really well for kids. Again, restorative practices are one way that we work to improve this, and we continue to do those things. So in terms of learning and academic excellence, the feedback from peers was overwhelmingly positive, or it appears it's overwhelmingly positive, right? Elementary and middle school students are reporting that they're ready for their next level of learning. Students are showing less confidence in their next level of learning at the high school age, yet a very high commitment to graduating. So we have this sort of dissonant data coming in around, I feel super ready to graduate, committed to graduating. I'm not so sure I'm ready for the next level. And I think that's something that we want to dig into. It has to do with uncertainty and just where those kids are at. 75% of families surveyed believe that their child is doing important learning at school, and students consistently say what they're learning matters for their future. So those are all good things to continue to improve upon as well. Moving to focus area 2. So we know climate and relationships set the stage for learning. Now we also have to start thinking about the instruction, because that is also a key to producing positive outcomes. I want to highlight our structured literacy framework, as this is something that is going to give our teachers consistent evidence-based tools to teaching reading, and we know that that is ongoing and happening, and we're seeing some early results from that. We have opportunities to sort of grasp onto in the area of, I would say, authentic assessment, as we try to better understand what our students know and can do. And then, of course, an aspiration we have is to make sure that we have high impact learning in every classroom, where every student is mastering those foundational literacy and math and social emotional learning skills that they're going to need to succeed at their next level. And finally, we're going to take a look at some results. We're going to look at some reading and foundational literacy skills, math, and our English language learner information. But before we start that, I want to just briefly mention that this all starts with our early learning, which is the next slide. And we are really proud of the high quality early learning here in St. Cloud. This lays the foundation for everything that follows. And I know I don't have to preach this because ages 2, 3, and 4, those kids are building essential skills, early literacy skills, problem-solving skills, social-emotional skills, and that these prepare them for kindergarten. And our incoming kindergarten class this year, we had nearly 40% of our kindergarten students mastering letter names. We had a growing number of kindergartners and first graders mastering those letter sounds, 41.5% roughly. And then another 40% of our 1 and 2 first and second graders mastering another really strategic research-based measure called nonsense words. And while I'm saying these numbers and you may think, oh, only 40%, like that seems, I think within our system, these are probably higher than what we've had before, but more importantly, we have systemic ways to measure and they're being systematized, and so we can improve from here with evidence-based, work that we're doing forward. So I'm really excited at the work of the early learning area, our elementary folks. They're knocking it out of the park when it comes to putting in place really key systems for us to be able to know how our kids are actually doing. And knowledge is power for all of us, parents, community partners, and our elementary teachers on how we're going to move these kids. I'm going to talk about these next few slides, and these are charts that come from the various tools we use to measure academic achievement and growth, okay? So this chart shows, what you're looking at here is a FastBridge chart. FastBridge is one of our early literacy and reading assessment measure tools, if you will. We are including our kindergarten through second grade students in this year-long look of data. We are systematically measuring 3 times a year. What you're looking at is the dark pink is the high risk, the students who need the most support. The pink are the kids who are some risk. They're students who maybe need some tier 2 or targeted interventions. And then the low risk are the kids who are low or no risk, and they're just on track, right? And so what you're seeing here is that from fall to spring, you're going to notice a slight shift, right? The high risk group increases slightly. The low risk group remains steady. And what is really important for you to know about this chart is that these assessments from each season get progressively harder and more difficult. So the fact that we have in the low risk category, we're holding at 35, really means that we've probably done a pretty good job of keeping kids on track in that group, right? The results reflect both the developmental challenges of learning to read and the impact of our targeted supports. So we want to focus on continuing to expand opportunities for students and build those essential skills, especially for those who start kindergarten without any early literacy experiences. But I just want to make sure that, in this time where we are having intense amount of work done instructionally, typically you would see lower, rates because of a dip, right? But I really feel like the work of, former Director Stebner and Assistant Superintendent Hansen and all of our GLALs, our grade level leads, is really paying off because we're managing right now in this 24-25 year to hold our own. My expectation is that this is gonna pop, and it's gonna be really exciting, especially as teachers get more steeped in the teaching of decoding and all those foundational skills. And so the next, this is also a FastBridge report, and this is on our A reading, broad measure of reading proficiency. And what this is showing you is that more of our students are meeting the benchmarks this year than they did in the first year, which is excellent. We've gone from 38 to 42%, a 4-point increase. And I expect us to see even more growth as we continue to administer the A reading. And again, this one is also done 3 times a year. This is what you're seeing here is just an annual picture of growth, because I want to make sure that you understand we're looking at achievement, but we're also looking to see in our system, are kids growing enough to meet the expected benchmark in order for us to feel confident that they are on track to read well in third grade. Okay, hope you're taking your questions down, because I'm going to move to math. And because we have a different tool that we use at the elementary to measure math, it's called iReady. You're going to get a different looking chart. And this, so I'll just try to explain this chart. First of all, this is a diagnostic, and the way they're displaying the data in this chart is against a benchmark, against a grade level benchmark. So it's a criterion referenced assessment. So it's looking for kids to meet a particular benchmark. If you look at the bottom bar where it says fall, beginning of the year, so at the start of the year, 41% of the students were 2 or more grade levels below, shown in the red section, which represented about 498 students. By the end of the year, that number dropped dramatically to 300, or 23%, which is significant success. We know if we can start to see these kinds of things and learn from those interventions and what's going on, that we can continue to get better. So at the same time that students are at or above grade level, that grew from 11% in the fall to 39% by spring, a major step forward in just 1 year. Math is a challenge everywhere. I'm just going to put that out there. You hear it in the news probably frequently. And so by giving our teachers tools that they can use to intervene, we're doing a really good thing. And I think this is a tool that teachers are really latching onto, and it is making a difference. Excuse me. All right. I'm going to move us to middle school math and reading. In the middle schools, we have yet another measure called STAR, which you're familiar with. This slide is a little hard to read, but hopefully you'll have time to kind of look at it more closely if you'd like to see the actual numbers. But let me just explain what it is. The student growth percentile data for our 6th through 8th graders this is a nationally norm referenced test. About 15. They say 15 to 18 million, which is such a broad range. Is it 15 million or is it 18 million? Kids take this test in grades K-12 across the country. And so what a score of 50% would represent typical growth, meaning that students are progressing at the expected rate. So what you see here is that for several testing seasons, and what's displayed here is 2 ways of looking at the data. One is fall to fall, so we're looking again at annual growth year over year. And the other way to look at growth is by year, from fall to spring. And so I put both of those on there so you can see. And what's important to note is that they're all over 50%, which just tells us really that our students are meeting typical growth expectations in both reading and math. However, if you were to look at the trend, you would say, well, it looks like we've dipped in our SGP, percentage of kids meeting growth, and we did have a little dip in 25. But it isn't anything that would, again, it's really not, this isn't going to be instructionally sensitive data. This is just high-level data to tell us, yep, here's how we did compared to the kids who took the test. So, the next student group I want to talk about briefly is just the required access English language learner exam that is given every year. And just for context, our district serves about 21.7% of our student population in English language services, which is double the state average of 10.4%, which means our district carries a significantly higher responsibility for supporting multilingual students. I'm not sure we're significantly more funded, but and so on the left-hand side, you're just seeing what the achievement rates are for our English language learners on the MCA, math and reading. And you can see that St. Cloud lags behind the statewide averages, highlighting persistent achievement gaps for our English language learner students. On the right, however, the growth graph, this tells a little bit of a different story. Here, St. Cloud students are growing at virtually the same rate as their peers across the state. I call this out because we are doing immense amounts of work with our English language learners, with our staff, our general ed staff and our EL staff. And I think it's important for us to understand that while these results are not where we want them to be, we want them to be better. We know that working to accelerate growth with our English language learners and helping them deal with unfinished learning, if you will take sustained focus and effort and sometimes more time, right, over multiple years to close some of these existing gaps. This is nothing new. We've heard this many, many years in a row, I think. Moving on, I want to just share one of the other measures, obviously the Minnesota Comprehensive Assessment, which measures how students are mastering our state academic standards. These charts that I have here just show you a snapshot, right? So you're just looking at the percentage of students who met the reading standards or met proficiency on this assessment. And you can see at the state level it was 49.6, in St. Cloud 33.7. On the right, we're just breaking it down by those achievement levels, and you can see that roughly 20% of our students are partially meeting, and then another 47 not meeting, with, again, 25 and 8 above. So these results show us that, while we're performing below the state average, they also give us valuable information to guide our work around some of our content standards and what we might be making more clear in the learning and teaching space for our learners. So we get benchmark reports back on both math and reading. We look at the data to try and understand where it is we need to shift resources, consider strategies, those kinds of things. So the purpose and use of our MCA data really was designed for us to use it at that level. Again, math, I'll just share with you our math results. On the left, you can see overall proficiency for the state was 45%. In St. Cloud, it's 24.8%. And again, you can see what the breakdown is of each of the different achievement levels. And again, we're using our benchmark information. I will tell you one surprising note on the 8th grade benchmarks. We saw the performance of our students within each strand did tick up, which is hopeful. I'm seeing in some of our early benchmark analyses that students are showing some significant growth in number sense, which is a really important foundational skill that should have an impact as they age up. So we're hoping that we will start to see a little bit of progress on some of these higher level measures as well. Again, these are the outcomes way up here. We don't want to over-focus here at the risk of not getting down here to the important process and output work that needs to happen to make those change. So that's our continued work. Focus area 3, and this is such a great focus area for a strategic plan. I don't know whose brilliant idea it was to put this into the strategic plan, but there's a lot of things that can go into here, and there's a lot of great things really happening. So as we move into this focus area, we shift from instructional outcomes to more on how can we innovate and continuously improve. Our key strengths is our evidence-based continuous improvement culture, and I want to give a big shout out to our assistant superintendents who are leading really important continuous improvement process work with all of our sites and our departments. An important opportunity ahead is creating some momentum with our new shared secondary instructional vision and aligning some of the more innovative strategies to support our middle and high school learners, to sort of help bring some more relevancy into the learning, to bring that voice, the student voice, the teacher voice, and just really look at ways that we can focus in on competencies, for example, and just better understand what it means to be ready for life, for the next step, through either portrait work, et cetera. So really looking forward to some of that aspirational work in the coming year. And then if we look at the current results that we have, I just want to make a shout out to our modern classroom work and all of the AI literacy work that our curriculum and teaching and learning folks have done to get our sixth graders going on that. Those are huge, huge results that we should be very proud of, because I was reached out to just this last week by a sixth grade teacher from the Osseo School District who said, "You're doing what? Your kids are getting what? AI literacy? Really?" Yep, they're getting that. So Finland is teaching all their elementary kids AI literacy, how to identify deep fakes, all of that. So very, very good things happening in St. Cloud, in the innovative space, if you will. Modern Classroom, by the way, lots of interest. We had 40 more educators involved in it this summer. We have 92% of our staff saying that innovation and continuous improvement is being promoted, and 89% feeling empowered to make decisions about how they're teaching and how kids, are showing their learning. And again, the numbers just show a growing culture of trust, innovation, and collaboration. And these are essential foundations for driving meaningful change. So congratulations, this is really good work happening in your district, and the school board and the superintendent and all of the leaders are a part of allowing this to happen. And I say allowing because there are a lot of districts that are not here yet, striving. Focus area 4 is the post-career and post-secondary options. And again, the goal is to ensure every student graduates ready for college and life beyond career. This focus area has a very lot happening within it. It would take me all night to cover all of the really great things that are happening in this. So obviously we have key strengths and the number of diverse pathway options that we are continuing to explore and develop and provide as opportunities for kids. One important thing moving forward is how are we expanding employer engagement potentially in internships, giving students more hands-on experiences that connect their learning to real careers. We are aspiring to make sure every kid leaves with some experience and or college post-secondary course work. That's been repeated in many presentations here. And then we are encouraged by what we're seeing. So the results are showing us that the community partners, the career focus is prioritized. For example, Future 100 event, I think that's happening again this year. We have the highest FAFSA completion rate that we've had in our history at 59.5%. And again, Tech High School actually has the highest rate of the region. Apollo, I think, is the third highest. So kudos to everyone who has helped us with those events of getting kids to get that really cumbersome paperwork filled out, because it's not easy. It's really challenging. If we had in our schools, we track the number of students that participate in real world work experiences. So we had 409 of those that were recorded last year through our scheduling process. And interestingly, on the high school survey, when we asked kids about working outside of the home, 64% of our students actually say they work outside the home. So that number is much lower, obviously, than if it were 64% of our kids. So that's just an interesting fact to kind of be digging into. We had another 305 of our students in PSEO, 170 dual enrolled. And again, our CTE concentrator graduation rate is a big celebration. We know when kids are completing consecutive multiple courses within a career pathway that they tend to graduate at higher rates. So we're doing the good work of staying committed to that effort. Combined with strong staff support, 83% of staff think students have meaningful opportunities to explore pathways. They reflect the community effort. Families, employers, and partners are working alongside our schools to ensure every student leaves prepared. This is not something we do completely on our own. We need a lot of help. And then the next slide is these are just some of, again, some bullet point or just highlights of the year, things that we will start to put in our metric dashboard to start following on and making sure that we're making progress on these. I just wanted to put a few of these out there because this is a very large focus area with lots and lots of data to it and lots of components. And I think the consensus on this one is that we are definitely making progress and it's in a good place to continue to grow, especially with the referendum passing and all of the new things that might be happening at Apollo. So this is I think, in a good place and continuing to even get better. Focus area 5 around family and community engagement. We have lots and lots of family partnerships. In fact, I was taking Director Avidson's partnership spreadsheet and I was trying to figure out, how do I put this up? We have so many partners. It's just amazing. So understanding how impactful that is work that we're going to consider an opportunity as we go forward to continue to look at doing those things. But family safety, families feeling like they're welcomed, making sure we have multiple ways to communicate with families, ensuring that, that we are building upon this really already strong foundation of trust is kind of key for us to continue to do. As far as the results for our family and community engagement section, I wanted to highlight one of the more quantitative outcomes, which is consistent attendance, which is in order for us to see such a significant increase in that, it has to be in part that our families are getting the kids here. And we also know that we've partnered with county and other community partners to get the Second Chance bus. And we're doing other really intentional positive messaging, for example, around getting kids into our safe places of learning. And that has really paid off. And we think we will continue to see that get better. So I think we had like a 7-point increase in our consistent attendance in just 1 year, which is pretty incredible. Again, 81% of the staff felt informed, I'm losing my note here, or involved in outreach efforts, right? So our teachers that are responding to these staff surveys are saying they feel very informed when these outreach efforts are happening, which is great. Parents feel that schools are partnering effectively at a rate of about 74%. And again, many families, at least families who've responded to the survey, are feeling that that they have opportunities to be involved in their child's education, which is great. We want to make sure we're removing any barriers to participation. And then finally, I just want to say as we go through and look at the work ahead, we want to leverage our strengths. We want to continue to pursue those high impact opportunities and accelerate on our aspirations as much as we can. These process, system, people pieces that we're putting in place are the ticket. And when we are all sort of rowing in the same direction and really strategic and thoughtful and using data and evidence to move our strategies, we will see. I've only in 2 systems ever seen the kind of change in outcomes, high outcomes, like this twice before. That's it. I think I was telling the team this morning. It happens when there is enough people in the system doing it in a consistent way, feeling comfortable with it, and it's really exciting. So I'm sharing some experience that I've had and then also what we want to continue to do. And then I'll just leave you with our commitment. District is committed to continuous improvement. Obviously, we will continue. This isn't the end. We don't just come and give this update once. We take this and then we're moving on this. We've got assistant superintendents who are doing those monthly data checks, we have SIP dashboards and impact cards, and we're also in the process of developing a metric plan for each of our key performance indicators that we're going to focus on going forward. And so you see a little bit of a timeline of when some of our key reviews are there, October, January, April, and then again in June, we'll do a big reflection and hopefully celebration. And I would say that's really it, is continuing to move the system to be really focused on evidence and information to move and make its next key decisions. So that's it. Thank you for letting me share all of that great information. And I think we can circle back now to the focus areas and take questions.
I like this approach. Anybody have any questions? Comments? Scott? No? Anybody else? Sorry, I didn't mean to sound so shocked. Natalie, this is our second time hearing this, correct?
Yeah, thank you so much, Donna, for all of the work that just went into this one thing that we're looking at here, but it's really an exciting snapshot of things that everyone has been working so hard on. I love at the end when you said we're moving the system, because this is a heavy lift. And you're totally right that we can celebrate our growth in our school district and then point to key measures as to why that's happening. And it's sustainable growth, because moving a whole system is the only sustainable way to do anything. So thank you for having that mindset. I wanted to go back to when you talked about preschool, and specifically with the FastBridge numbers that we're seeing in K through 2. And just making sure that I'm understanding it correctly. So this is in number 1, I think, or number 2, focus 2, yeah, on that FastBridge K2 early literacy and reading data. It seems to me that, what did you say is the percentage of our kids who haven't had any formal school that come into us in kindergarten? Did you say that percentage?
I don't think I said that percentage, but what I know is that, well, actually, I should turn this to Nikki, because you probably have the numbers memorized. It's a large percentage.
Last year, if memory serves me right, we ended up at about 356 students being served in our preschool 4s program, and our cohort was around 772 at the end of the year for kindergarten. So just slightly above half.
Specifically because we have a legislator in the audience, and just because I say this all the time, even when she's not here, is free preschool for all, please. I know that's a heavy lift, but the lift, yeah, specifically for kids. I mean, this is what it looks like for my kids who went through 2 years of preschool. That's their privilege, because not everybody has that privilege. So I know I'm speaking to the choir here, everybody knows this, but like, just to say on record, like, we're right now, until as a state we can get to free preschool for all, the catch-up work is done by our kindergartners, kindergarten first and second grade teachers, and the catch-up continues, because you've shown us clearly tonight that we are growing. Most students are growing. But if you start behind, and it's solely based on either your privilege or your non-privilege, like, that's not okay with me. And it's not okay with us either, but it seems like the simplest way to affect change in that area is free preschool for all. But I know that's not the wave of a magic wand, and where's the money going to come from that and all that sort of stuff. But just a shout out to the work for Preschool for Success that Rotary has been doing with us, and like, we're affecting change one student at a time in that. The next thing I wanted to ask about was the iReady math for K through 5. And I've had the pleasure of hearing this twice today, so now I get to like do deeper dives with you. I loved that you pointed out that we went from 489 to 298 in the red area, but also just to say for that mid or above grade level, we went from 126 students to 720 6. So can you talk about that a little bit? Because that, it's not only our, our performers who are struggling the most, but it's also our performers, everybody's growing, it looks like to me. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Do you want me to take that, Donna?
I would just say one thing and then I'll pass it to you. And I think this is something that is most directly tied to the fact that math learning is most suited to instruction, right? Whereas reading learning is people think they can teach their kids to read at home, but not always math, right? So I do think that, in part, all of our kids need our very talented math instruction happening. Nikki?
Yeah, so one of the things to remember as we're looking between the Literacy FastBridge and the iReady Math is this is the criterion referenced assessment. So you're going to see that fall score, that bottom line there, they are being tested on grade level standards that they have not been exposed to yet.
Right.
So as we take this assessment 3 times throughout the year, they are getting that geometry unit. They're getting exposed to that second grade standard if they're in second grade. So we expect to see that growth and progress. We also expect to see the reduction of those colored bands. You can see iReady does break it apart in that 2 levels or more behind grade level, that level behind grade level, and then on grade level or above grade level. And our expectation for our elementary sites is always at least 1 year's worth of growth. And as much as possible, we want to accelerate beyond a year's worth of growth, but at least a year's worth of growth for all. But that does mean, Natalie, that if I'm 2 years behind, I may not get to that green on grade level yet,
Right.
but we do expect to get there.
The last thing I'll say, or we could be here forever because this is so much data. When we were talking specifically about Modern Classroom this morning in the committee, can you just explain what you said about how that encourages agency in students? Because I guess I didn't really realize that. I knew Modern Classroom was moving into, instruction that is in person and then also, can be referenced later with video. But I didn't really understand that it's teaching children and students how to have their own agency in their learning.
Well, okay. So I'll try to answer that. And if I need some help, I might ask Katie to pitch in. But what I was saying earlier this morning was that one of the skills we know are absolutely critical for the world our kids are going into is going to be this idea of agency in knowing how I learn and making strategic choices about tasks or work that I'm doing to get myself the learning I need, right? Like eventually. But this idea of building kids' ability to say, I need the teacher to do direct instruction for me on this because I've thought about how I tackle this learning task is something that we can start to see growing in our, middle, upper level, grade levels with kids. And it's a skill, it's a life skill they're going to need when they get to college. They're going to need that when they get to a career or wherever they're going. And then I think Katie would be able to say more about the mastery and the other component of it. But to me, the real benefit in Modern Classroom is that it is going to help us get after agency and turn us a little bit more towards competencies.
Yeah, that's great. The thing that is nice about Modern Classroom, especially at the secondary level, is when students walk in, they know where they're at and where they need to get to. And so that's part of agency as well, where students come in and they can see where they are in the lesson and the unit plan and what they need to do and who they need to interact with, whether it's their teacher, a small group, another classmate, in order to reach those areas to demonstrate their mastery. And they're not always demonstrating mastery in a way that is traditional, where when we demonstrated mastery in school, we were taking a unit test that covered multiple subjects over multiple periods of time. A student demonstrating mastery in Modern Classroom might be taking a little quiz, but often they're talking to a teacher about a subject and demonstrating what they know through conversation. They might be doing a project and presenting it to demonstrate what they know. It's generally a more hands-on way that they're showing mastery rather than just taking a test or a quiz. It can be that, but it often isn't. So not only are we having students do agency by knowing where they need to go and what they need to do and how they need to get what they need to learn, it can look a little different than what we're used to, but we're also showing students how they can demonstrate what they know in a multitude of ways.
Yeah, that's all I have. I mean, I could continue, but I'll let some other people talk, and thank you for this work, for all of you. This is exciting stuff.
Yeah, I kind of have brain overload too. There's a lot going on in this stuff, and you guys have all done a really, really phenomenal job, I think. And I'm always a big supporter of our school district, and I get really frustrated when we get compared directly with school districts where the demographics of the district, both from a student population and an income especially, is so much different. And it's just not a direct comparison. And the things that our teachers are doing with students are phenomenal. And we always see that in the growth numbers. Our growth numbers are always very, very strong. We're bringing students a long way, but we're starting from a place that isn't as far forward as those other districts are starting. So there's a lot of work to do in that, and our teachers are doing that work. But it's frustrating because it doesn't appear when the Realtors Association sends out their best places to buy a home because of the school district, it doesn't appear that we're in the top school districts, and that's just not true. But okay, so I was looking on the perception data page. The question, students at my school are kind to each other. We see this when we do our student surveys every year. This is always the one area where it's like, oh my God, it's like 53% of elementary students say yes, 37%, 1/3 of junior high students feel that students are kind to each other, and 46% of high school students feel students are kind to each other. And again, 56% of parents, which isn't a number where you're cheering and clapping, think that students are kind to each other. I think it would be really, I had two questions about that. And the first one is, I wish that question was asked in two parts. And that would be, students are kind to each other at home or away from school, and students are kind to each other at school. I'm wondering if we would get different answers on that. And then another piece of that was, did this improve? Have we seen improvement in this with the changes that we made with cell phones? Because I'll let you answer.
Yeah. So in our dip on this question for the 3 years across, these were the best rates for last year on this question. And it reflects this, I think it's sort of a culture thing, right? That our kids are not, first of all, they're not interacting as much face to face as maybe, we did long ago, partly because of the culture. It's a growth opportunity for us, right? This kind of work, though, takes time for kids to be in collaboration. So, how are we designing group work for kids when we're doing learning lessons as a way to help foster and grow some of their skills around this? Sometimes what we think, like I don't think Jason's very kind, is all in my head, right? So these are perceptions, and oftentimes we can think those things, but they may not always be true, but they're important for us to address. So I don't know if anybody else would have.
And I know this may be a little out of pocket, but you know that I'm very blunt, right? I think another challenge that we face is that our adults are not very kind, right? Collectively, right? In our discourse, right? When we look on one of one of the things I just sent out to families is, right, like let's be kinder on social media when I'm talking about school safety, right? If we just take a look at the social media that is out there and that's not kind, right? So where are we modeling for our students and for our children who are always watching us that respect matters, right? And I mean, this board models it consistently, but I think that's one of the challenges that we face, right? And you don't agree and you still respect each other.
Well,
That's right.
That's one of the reasons that I think would be interesting to know how they feel it is at home versus at school. Because at school, we've had them put their cell phones away, so they're not interacting that way. So now it becomes personal interaction. And we can kind of control the environment for personal interaction. So do they feel at school that their cohorts or their peers are kind, but then once they leave the school and they get their cell phones back in their hand and they start communicating that way and kind of ganging up on other students and things, is there a difference? And it would just be really interesting to know how they feel about that. I also, and this was just going to be a general comment, and there's nowhere for me to fit it in, so this is as good a place as any, but I don't see in here, there wasn't a lot of discussion about mental health supports, counselors, and different programs throughout our curriculum, and how does that fit into all of these? I would imagine that it fits into all of the areas, and it isn't like we're a specific behavioral health.
So I think, thank you for that feedback. I'm going to make a mental note of that and make sure that next time I have some information related to that. I will tell you that our behavior outcomes, the suspension and the analysis that I did on the incident activity, like there are hints of where all of that really great mental health work, the strategies for assessing the incidents and responding to them, if I didn't call it out in that first focus area, I should have, because that team, Jen Lacey's team, Kate Bukowski's team, I mean, they're responding to the behaviors, right? And supporting, and our community partners who are, the tier 3, tier 2 people that are helping. It's all of that working together to create those decreases in those big outcomes. So thanks for that feedback. I'll make a note.
I was looking at the math performance, and again, this is kind of a generalized question, but back in 2007, the math standards changed drastically. And ever since then,
2014 as well.
ever since then, math has been a real struggle across the state. I mean, proficiency dropped, and the natural reaction is to blame it on the schools, not on more difficult standards. And it's like we've never recovered from that when those changes were made. And I remember I wasn't on the board yet at the time, but I remember specifically when those dropped and the impact that it had on proficiencies. And it's maybe just a comment more than a question. But on the access learning language, the ELL progress, again, and you brought up the fact that when you compare our district to the state, we're below the state average, but when you compare our growth to the state, we're significantly above the state average. And I know in our district, because I asked Nikki the question a couple weeks ago, there's 34 different languages that are spoken. 34 different languages that are spoken at home.
I think it's 54, Al. I think
54?
it's, yep.
54. Sorry about that. 54 languages that are spoken within our school district at home. And that creates some issues in and of itself. And it puts a lot of pressure on the EL programs. Our district has a significantly higher population of Somali students where the curriculum for Somali, when it began to happen here, there was no curriculum for Somali students or for teaching Somali students in an EL program. And that stuff has really just been developed since then. And I think that our district has had a lot to do with some of that development. But when you have EL students, if someone comes here from Germany and they speak German, they're an EL student, they're an English language learner, but they've gone to school in Germany and they've learned, and they're coming to us at a seventh grader is coming to you at a seventh grade curriculum level. They have the knowledge, they don't have the language. So they need to learn the language, but they can kind of, once they've learned that language, they can fit right into their grade level and they can move forward. It may not, it isn't as significant of an issue right now as it was probably 10 years ago, but in Somali immigrants, as they came to our country, if they were at a seventh grade level, many of them had never attended any formal education. So they were coming to us not at a seventh grade learning level and just needed to learn the language. They were coming to us at a seventh grade age, having to learn the language with no formal education. So they had 7 years of catching up to do in order to get to a point where they could graduate, right? So when I look at these charts and I see that we're below the state average, yet we have a higher percentage of students who come from a country that does not have a strong educational foundation, but our growth numbers are higher than the state average, that tells me that we're doing a really good job with what we have. But it's very difficult to take a SLIFE student, and for Bernie, if you don't know SLIFE, it's students with limited or interrupted formal education. If you take a SLIFE student, it's very difficult to bring them up to grade level. Even if you are very good, you have a very good EL program that teaches them the language, the English language, you still have anywhere from 1 to 12 years of formal education to catch them up on also. And it's a more significant challenge that I believe is reflected in these charts right here. Okay? Again, not necessarily a question, but a comment. Math, I thought kind of the same thing. Math is a fairly universal language. Math in Europe is the same, or math in South America is the same as math here, and it's the same in every country as it is here, but it's the language barriers that get in the way. However, if you're coming from a country where it doesn't have a very strong education program, you're not going to have that formal math education. Where someone coming from a country that has a very good education program, even if they don't speak our language, math is fairly universal, they're going to get there a little bit quicker. So I think that it shows up there also. And I think those were the comments that I had. I'm very excited about Apollo, the renovations that are being done at Apollo and the things that we're going to be able to do in our career and tech areas, which is where a lot of the dollars are being focused, or a lot of the remodeling is being focused. But to bring the tech high school development really brought forward a much, much, much stronger career and technical education program for our district, which was mirrored at Apollo. But now Apollo's facilities are going to be brought up to the same level for career and tech as Tech High School, and I think it's just an awesome thing. It's an area that people should be really excited about. So, thank you.
Zadano. I just have a brief comment, not any questions, but I think what we were able to, so I had the privilege to see all of this morning, is while all this data has been collected and put together in such a informative way, we're already putting it into practice this year, and I was already able to hear the stories from Superintendent, was not there, but Assistant Superintendent Harris, and what's happening. This data makes a difference to drive systematic change, and those changes, we're not waiting. Things are already starting this school year, looking at all the hard pieces, and I think that is what is important, because this is what's going to continue to make changes like we saw in suspensions and like we're seeing growth. And the work that was put together to put this in front of us tonight is immense, but all of that data matters because that's how we're making change. And the group has done an amazing job, all of the group, to get this to where we're at, because it takes time to make systematic changes.
I have a few questions and probably some comments as well. I do think the kindness conversation that we had is really important, and certainly the modeling. One other piece that I think I've used in some surveys before that sometimes is also instructive is a question about their perceptions of if they're kind to other people. And then you begin, because we always do this, we say that they're not kind, but I am, and then you begin to see a discrepancy between how people perceive their own behaviors, and parents included, and it might be helpful for them to think about their own behavior, because we know many people probably would have some opportunities for improvement, let's just say that. On the FastBridge K2, can you help me interpret that a little bit? So on the high risk versus the low risk, and you see the 43 go down, what does that, I understand that it changes fall, winter, and spring, but why are low risk students seeing a larger decline? Like, help me put that together.
So I think part of it is there's a number of what we call probes or measures that go into scoring the composite, right? And I don't know exactly what the proportions are because it's proprietary and they won't tell me. I've asked them 100 times. I keep trying to get it. And I keep doing my own method to see if I can figure it out. But I think part of it is, in the fall where they're measuring letter names, letter sounds, help me out, concepts of print. What's the other one? Onset sounds. The real easy ones that, kids can have success at right away in the fall. And then we get to the winter benchmark, and I think they add some word segmenting and some harder tasks. And that probably weighs in a little more on the overall composite score, right? And
And the level of accuracy changes. So I think an example might be helpful. So let's say in the fall, I'm expected to learn 31 letter sounds or master that. In the winter, that would change up in the 50s. And then it would go up into the 70s, 80s, 90s, right? So it is a progressive rubric. So not only does the skills get harder as you go from fall to winter and winter to spring, but the expectation of mastery within that level also changes. So it's a progressive improvement.
Would it not change across the board for high risk, some risk, and low risk? So why do you see high risk go from 32 to 39 to 37, and you see low risk go from, I don't understand that particular thing. And I'll bring it a little bit full circle, which maybe doesn't have application, but I would be interested in, not just for K through 12. There is a belief by many that we are losing boys, young boys, in education. And that could impact some things. What are we doing in our district to pay attention to what is happening? I mean, we're seeing at the college level and many fewer boys going on to college. What are we evaluating within District 742 to try and change that? And what might that say about some of the information?
I'm going to lean on my friends to the left here for that one.
Yeah, great conversation. We had the privilege this morning to start this conversation on, let's just take it just simple. As a student going to school, you are a learner, right? And if we help our teachers understand, which they do, shout out to our teachers, our building administrators, we have great folks. And it's not an easy job, and they show up every day in the practicality of what was just spoken about what's going on outside in the world, the environment, right? And so our kids are faced with a lot of things, to your point of if my mom and dad aren't modeling good behavior, or whoever I'm around, right? How do we teach kids at the core of learning how to be kind and respectful? And our teachers work on that, right? We talk about social-emotional learning of how do our heart and mind get to know each other. If I do remove my phone that I could be on all day long, right? How are parents monitoring this? I'll give you a quick strategy. Ask your kids to pull up their information on how many hours a day they're on their phone, right? That's how you can monitor it. Appropriate use in phones, right? In the sense. If you go to 86.8% CTE concentrator graduation rate, right? You help kids find out what they like, what their interests are, start early from 5th grade, where we first go back to literacy and reading and who gets the right to have the resources where school starts earlier than others, right? And how they show up in all different ways. They might be behind or not, right? To Assistant Superintendent Hanson's point of teaching fundamental skills when kids show up, however they show up, we try to look at it in the small approach of yearly growth, right? However you come to us, let's grow you from there. And they work on the literacy skills and showing up and doing that. But in the sense of along the way, if I don't have good experiences in that, if my hope goes or my confidence when we go along in school, because middle school, when you ask these questions, how do I feel? It depends on the day when they're having thousands of interactions with schools and how they look. 400, 500, 600 kids, a daily interaction, and we teach human connection. But back to the point of where we find hope in that is we help them find out what they like, and our concentrated data says if a kid takes a course in the multiple pathways, if it's robotics, manufacturing, math, and you help them find out what they like along the way. I've had the conversation with 8th grade boys that don't want to be in choir because their tunes start to change, right? How do you support those kids to, maybe you still want to continue in the arts, right? In that. So finding interest and passion in school along the way helps them to be able to find out something that they like, and we explore all the way through our system to 12th grade. And our result is when we look at, okay, well, the graduation rate says 66.1%. Well, yeah, but it's a whole lot of things, variables into that. But when you see what if I find out what I like, 2 or more courses in the content area, I like it. Woods, robotics, they build houses, your kids right now go through the system. We have kids in our families right here on the board that go through, and our kids are exposed to a lot of things. And so it's finding the interest for the boys that may say, hey, I might lose hope or I don't talk to somebody. And one of the biggest things is we have folks in the buildings, to Al's point, that get to know all kids. They start with building a relationship. How are you? I like your shoes today, right? I get to know you. I get to know, like, Al's grumpy in the morning because he didn't get enough sleep, right? Well, okay, well, let's use all the systems of our mental health, our counselors, shout out to our counselors and our teachers that identify. First, if I don't show up for school, and I see it on a repetitive basis of taking daily attendance, that's where it starts. Well, why is he not coming to school? Our teachers understand that. They call and say, hey, I didn't see Al today. What's going on, right? He might say, okay, well, I might have a situation where a kid was mean to it. Our restorative practices identify from the common sense, well, let's talk to Al about he was being mean or whatever. That plays a part into some of the interactions with school where boys may not feel included along the way, but all students in the sense of how do you create an environment that our kids have good relationships. Donna didn't pull the question up, or how many kids feel safe at school? They feel safe. The teachers say they feel safe. It's building those relationships, interactions, point by point in the sense. So I know I took off, but I just wanted to say, in the sense of our conversation, that organic piece of just who I am and how do I help them grow in the sense. And so boys, specifically to your question, we found like, what do I like and how do I grow all the way through? And that helps to this.
And I would just add, I think you asked, what are we doing? And I think we are establishing good rituals and routines that are responsive daily to personalized learning and needs within our students. So when I hear you guys talk about, kindness and how are we treating kindness and how that looks and shows up within our classrooms, I don't think it's a one and done. We don't teach kindness, we model kindness throughout our entire day. I think about some specific strategies in elementary. Last year, we developed in all K-5 classrooms Wish You Well routine as part of their morning meeting, which is another strategy of building community and setting the stage for learning for the day and getting some of that social emotional interaction. We also now have a Wish You Well board in every classroom. If a student is absent or missing from the classroom, they wish them well as part of a daily routine. The other layer to that is our new SEL curriculum, Purposeful People. We launched the year with a kindness kickoff, and we will end the year with a kindness close. And in between, we have 9 character traits that we are developing that social emotional character in all students. And so I think we are creating those rituals and routines in an environment of belonging to be responsive to the personal needs of our learners within the district. I think of an academic example. You had asked about the low risk, the some risk, the high risk, right? And it is a little bit complex and confusing. We have analyzed that data for the last few years, and it is complicated. But one piece and a layer of support that is another routine to support our academic learning within our elementary sites is every student who scores in some risk or high risk, some risk or high risk, are getting personal progress monitoring and intervention supports. Every kid is tracked on a spreadsheet, indicated on what is the highest priority of that strand of literacy development, and progress monitored weekly or bi-weekly with that intervention. So as those kids move, you got to remember it's kind of flip-flop. So if I'm low risk, that means I'm on track or on grade level. But any student who is showing some or high risk is getting that individual layer of personalization of what they need as a learner to grow and develop.
So theoretically, could that cause a drop because the individualized attention is not then going to your already low-risk person? So if you're in some ways, we're assuming that they're okay.
I would say yes, but we are always enriching and extending. So just because they might not be getting progress monitoring if they're on track and on grade level, they are getting an enrichment and extension at their level. Because again, years worth of growth, even if I am on track, we still expect that we accelerate them then a grade level.
In any of this, do you base, when you look at the flat numbers, it's all students. Does it further get divided by, are you looking at demographics? So are you looking at race, gender, those sorts of things, and then tweaking approaches based upon that information as well?
We have active dashboards that allow us to disaggregate by every student group, every grade level. The kids can be divvied up into progress monitoring groups, and those groups can be monitored and evaluated. And I think at our next A&I meeting, we're going to take a deep dive into the literacy and math by all of this breakdown over time, cohort, student group. So we'll figure out what we maybe want to lift up to inform as well. But yes, we regularly do that. We've been regularly doing that in my career, many, many years, because those are the student groups that we're evaluated on at a federal and state level.
And then the last reminder that I'll give, Heather, is when we say flatlining, right, I see it as more of sustaining. When we go from fall to winter to spring, those levels of risk stayed the same, but the expectations of assessment rose. So it wasn't a flat line. They all grew at relatively similar proportions, but they didn't flatten. They grew as they went through those risk categories throughout the year because that rubric got progressively more challenging.
last comment, and I'm really not, I haven't formulated this enough. When we talk about modern classrooms and agency, I like the idea of it. I caution probably about assuming that the reality is the same. We're still working with young people, and agency is really, really hard. And I think sometimes in a modern classroom, you can assume that they're learning that agency, and really it becomes a little bit lazier. And I would say both for students and in some cases for teachers, because the easy answer is just go watch it again. Go find your place. And I just think that, yes, there's an agency that's taught, you're teaching it from the very young ages all the way through. I just caution us to rely upon it too much, because there is such a different growth pattern for students and learning agency. And some of it you can, I used to say this to coaches all the time, because you would have kids who would come in freshman year, they got it and they knew how to have conversations and they were mature and everything else. And then you would have kids who maybe didn't get it until they were junior or senior year. And then there were always some folks who maybe 4 or 5 years later, they actually looked back and said, oh, now I understand. But I think sometimes when we assume that we're building those things in, that we also have to just remind ourselves that while I think we can certainly nurture it, I think that all of us have a different wiring that we just want to be cautious.
I appreciate that comment, and I'll just say that the agency that I'm talking about when I share that isn't that we want kids to just decide what they would do and go off on your own. It is really intentional around the learning and that child thinking and uncovering their thinking. So we're moving to to really be able to see their thinking requires them to have agency, and the teacher's always observing, guiding, right? Because without that skill, right, we're doing a disservice to our kids. So when I talk about agency, I want to make sure it's really clear. I'm not saying we want to grow agency so it's a free-for-all and the kids are just going to run off and do whatever they want and the teacher's going to say, oh, that's nice, keep doing that. No, not at all. It's always tied to a really clear learning task, and it is about demonstrating learning. So agency in demonstrating learning, and I'll make sure that I say that more clearly, because I don't want people to get the wrong idea, right? I really, really don't, because I appreciate that. That's really important for us to clarify. We are about the learning part of it, and how I think, and what choices I can make to demonstrate how I know is what we're trying to grow. That's the agency. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and I get that part. I think it's very theoretical, and I think that in practice, it's just harder. And I'm a big believer that there's a bell curve, and in terms of performance, you have, again, some students who learn it easier. You have some teachers who I think are better at it. But I think that, to me, some of that language, and again, I saw it in my grad school programs and everything else. It's really nice to sit in a classroom and to listen to theory about how things work. And then it's ultra important that you go back and everybody's understanding and thoughtful about what the actual practice and the interpretation is.
I was just going to take a minute to expand the comment that was made about Somalia. And I sat in years of cultural and language Somali training through, doesn't matter how, but I just learned a lot about the country through folks who are from there. And just for a little bit more context, I think it's really important to understand about Somalia that it was colonized by France and Britain and Italy before 1960. And so it's not apples to apples to compare, Germany to Somalia, because that just wasn't the reality. The reality of agency, speaking of that, wasn't there for our Somali friends until they got their independence in 1960. And then the other piece we've talked about here on the board before is that the Somali language wasn't even a written language until 1972. And so, whereas generationally, even if my, great-great-great-grandfather from Germany didn't read very well, at least there was a language for someone to read, right? So, and that was part of the problem with having our Somali dual immersion. And having folks that were able to teach that, because it's not hundreds of years of learning, it's from 1972 on. And then pre-Civil War in the 1980s, in my understanding, there was a well-structured educational system, and that it was increasing literacy and then, of course, access for all students as well. But that's really only from 1960 to 1980 that they even had an opportunity for that out of colonial rule. And then, of course, we know in 1991, the Civil War totally destroyed the infrastructure. And I just learned that it wasn't until 2012 that the Ministry of Education was reestablished in Somalia. And not only then did they have to figure out how to reestablish everything, but also how do we do adult education for those years of missed education? So just wanted to point that out, that there may be some of our friends with grandparents or great-grandparents living here that they don't know how to read the language, because the written language is made when they're in their 30s or 40s. So just wanted to add some context to that comment.
Let me just ask one thing. Can you just go to the bilingual seal? And that's how we
Let's go.
That's how we appreciate it, though, right? We did state we have 54 languages spoken.
Right.
We had 21 certifications last year around world language certifications, right? So we acknowledge we have a diverse language population, and to our bilingual seal certifications, it helps us to appreciate all different races,
Just
backgrounds, ethnicities, and languages specifically around what they bring. And so that's a big one that sometimes we don't talk about, and we certify our students to that, and that's a good thing for us.
I remember that there's,
Yes.
Yeah.
And so right. And we have our
College readiness,
kids.
there we
Yeah,
go.
right. We look at work experience. We want to make sure our kids are prepared for the world, and those are some of the ways. But to your language point, we acknowledge,
Yeah.
and those certifications help.
I think the last thing I'll say is, every board meeting I think about, there was an Apollo student who came here as a senior and talked to us years ago. I don't know if y'all remember that. And he talked about how he spoke 5 languages. But he'd only been here since 9th grade. And so he's like, and I also speak English, but it's actually 6th, of the languages I know. So our kids are amazing. Thanks, Jason.
Okay. Thank you, Donna. Thank you, everyone. This was impressive. Okay, just a couple things left for tonight. We have one policy reading. We have the second reading for proposed revised board policy 421, gifts for the district personnel, gifts to district personnel, and we're bringing back Amy Scallard, Executive Director of Finance and Business Services, for this reading.
Okay, hello again. So this is coming back for the second read, and we do have a few changes from the first read. We did bring this through Board Finance Committee as well. And so there's not a lot of changes, but I'll just highlight where things have changed from the first time it came to the board. So the first change is in the purpose statement. So what you see in the proposed policy in front of you tonight is our original purpose statement as it reads in our current policy. This does differ from MSBA's purpose statement, which was in as the recommendation the last time we brought the policy forward. As we started to dig into this, and Tracy and I had some conversations as well, MSBA's purpose statement isn't as pointed probably as we would maybe like. Their purpose statement says that the purpose of the policy is to avoid the appearance of impropriety or a conflict of interest. After some discussion, we're not really just trying to avoid the appearance. We want to avoid the conflict of interest or the impropriety. So we have gone back to our purpose statement, which I think is much clearer and really gets at the intent that it's not about someone thinking there's a conflict. Even if nobody's going to think there's a conflict of an interest or some sort of issue, we don't want the behavior to be occurring. So that is the first change, is to go back to that. In scrolling down then, in the general statement of policy, nothing has changed in section A. Nothing has changed contextually or in terms of the content of B. There's just a little bit of cleanup in where the word however, about halfway through there, came in, and some grammatical changes. So nothing that changes the intent of the policy, but just cleaning up some of the wording. In section C, there are a few changes, and these were changes that came from the recommendation of Finance Committee to better align this wording with what the actual statute has. So in the second sentence, the policy proposed now reads, employees may accept services of insignificant value. The MSBA policy and what we saw last time said items, but the statute really references services when it uses that insignificant value term. The items really come into that next part of the sentence, items of a promotional or public relations nature with a cost of $5 or less. This was another change. MSBA has resale value. We did change that back to cost to align with statute so that our policy isn't differing from statute. And then those were the only changes there. And then the last change, which I think, given some of that context about the historical reason why we had kind of called out that whole list of who is a school district official. So we were all in agreement that keeping that term school district official and giving a more comprehensive list of who that entails is a benefit to keep in the policy. And so we've added back the definition of school district official, done a little bit of cleanup in terms of organizing that list, removing some terms like resource managers that we as a district maybe used back then but don't use, and then just kind of cleaning up some of the terminology. And so up in section F of section 2, previously that had said the last part there, or other school district officer, which isn't something we have. And so we've just changed that to say, or other school district official, which would then reference back down to that more comprehensive list in the definitions section. So those are the changes from the first reading. Again, the rest of what was really just the more detailed word for word from the statute, and nothing has changed going forward from the rest of the policy from the first read. Questions?
All right, thanks, Amy. Moving on to reports then for tonight, we have our superintendent's report presented by our superintendent, Dr. Lori Putnam.
Thank you so much. I am going to need that screen, Amy. Thank you. First, I want to start by recognizing that this is School Board Appreciation Month. Yes, hence the cupcakes. And so we do have a card I'm going to hand to Chair Haas, but it is for all of you. And so we just want to say from all of us and our teachers and our team and our who aren't here, our support staff and our licensed staff, we just want to say thank you very much. This is a service that you do. You do not get paid a lot for the amount of time you put in. It's probably a lot like coaching pay rates. So we know that's very little, and you really are here for all kids, and I cannot thank you enough for that. So Thank you for being who you are and the board that you are. I am excited to share tonight something that we have not, I think I messed that up. Yep. It's 4 numbers, Laurie. There we go. I'm excited to share something tonight that we've not talked about. I think it was last year or perhaps a year prior. All schools that receive federal funds are required to do education around the Constitution on September 17th, which happens to be today. So I thought, how fitting, right, is to show you what we do. So I'm just going to run through the lesson plans that we offer. I won't go into them in depth, but I wanted to just show you like how we teach our kids at different levels. So here is the K2, and so you can see it's pretty simple. We start out with that it's a special holiday. Isn't it adorable? And unfortunately, we're not going to get to watch the videos, so I'd be happy to share them with you. And so we just talk about, for in a developmentally appropriate way, why the Constitution is important. Together, we can learn, right? And we hear a song about the Constitution, and then we talk about what kids at that age understand is about rules. And so what are the rules that might make our community kinder and safer? And then they draw and write about it. Just to build in some literacy. Here we go to grades 3-5, so we start out with the same slide, and now you see the objectives, right? Really laying out, these are our learning objectives or learning targets for those of you who aren't familiar with lesson setup. We've got another video here. And then we talk a little bit like what is the Constitution, just starting to lay it out. And then we ask our kids work on a Constitution for their classroom, right? Again, building community, but talking about responsibilities on both parts and the rights. And then they sign it on that little cute replica. When we get to the middle school, now that we're at the upper grades, you'll start to see a little bit more in-depth work happening. So again, we've got our objectives, the fun video, because everybody likes a cartoon. And then we start to break down and give more information, talking about the parts of the Constitution, talking about the preamble. And then what we ask our students to do is to, in their own words, right? What is the preamble? How might you reword it in your own modern phrases? I hope they weren't using Gen Alpha slang, or none of us would know what they were saying. But I think then they reread it, and then each group gets to share what their modern version is. And then they talk about a whole class discussion about why were the phrases important to the Constitution, how do they continue to shape the U.S., and which of these are most important for us to focus on. We get to the high school level, and again, you see the objectives, more in-depth definitions. Again, there's the preamble, a new cartoon, and a video. And so here they introduce the Bill of Rights, talking about the first 10 amendments. Then they do a review with the students. Are they getting the learning targets? And that's a classroom discussion, right? Working on oral literacy. And then we talk about voter registration, and students are actually able to register to vote, which is also a requirement that we provide that information. So just wanted you guys to know what it is that we do and how we integrate that into our classrooms, along with literacy standards around speaking, writing, reading, and listening. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and then we have a Board of Education Standing Committee reports. I believe we have 2. And we have Achievement, Integration, Equity Board Committee Chair Diana Fenton.
Good evening. Good evening, Chair Haas, Superintendent Putnam, members of the board, and cabinet members. Today, the AIE meeting met, and Donna Roper presented us with the strategic plan outcomes that were presented at tonight's board meeting. Questions were asked in more depth than at tonight's board meeting, and modifications were made. We've also made changes to the meeting schedule for the remainder of 2025, adding a meeting in December so we can get through the rest of our reports for this year.
Thank you. And then Finance and Audit Board Committee Chair Heather Weems. Do you have a, maybe? No problem. Okay. Last up, we have future agenda items. The October 1st board meeting topics will include Apollo Building Project, the 2025 to 2028 strategic plan draft, policy readings, and school updates. At this time, does any board member wish to suggest a future agenda item? All right. Last up then is to adjourn the meeting. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Meeting is adjourned. The time is 8:40 p.m. Thank you for watching. Have a good night. We'll be back October 1st.